This latter part of our event here today for Green New Deal, Our Path to Progress, is going to be brought with a video from one of the people that was supposed to be here but had an unfortunate event, meaning that he's got another event in Chicago where we're expanding the reach of modern monetary theory. His name is Pastor Delman Coates, and Delman is just a phenomenal speaker, as you'll see in a moment. Delman is the head of the Our Money campaign, and Delman's got a particularly interesting perspective on this. As the pastor of Mount Vernon Church, he's got a very large congregation in Clinton, Maryland, and he's going to tell you all about that in the video. But one of the things about Delman is this. Delman came from a positive money background. For those of you who don't know what positive money is, you can look it up. But bottom line is it's a very adjacent mindset to modern monetary theory. And as he came into modern monetary theory, he realized, wow, this is so important that we can't hold on to this knowledge. Let me take it to the churches, let the churches know about it. So Delman is creating a organization, a campaign called Our Money, and his video explains what they do and why it's so important. With that, I bring you Delman Coates.
Hi, my name is Delman Coates. I am the organizer of the Our Money campaign, and I'm so delighted to be with you this morning. I regret that I couldn't be there in Harrisburg today for this incredible gathering on perhaps one of the most central issues that we're confronting today from a public policy perspective, and that is how we're going to address climate change. It is indeed the existential threat facing humanity, and I want to commend Real Progressives for bringing together activists and organizers and average, ordinary people alike to talk about the policy solution that is really designed to address our climate change crisis today, and that's the Green New Deal. I am a local pastor in Clinton, Maryland, right outside the nation's capital, and we have organized the Our Money campaign over the past year to really address the central question that is always raised by policymakers and politicians when it comes to robust spending proposals like the Green New Deal. It's the central question that is always asked when discussing other issues as well, whether it's Medicare for all, free public college, abolishing student loan debt, and a range of other priorities as well. And that question is, how are we going to pay for it? Where is the money going to come from? This question tends to be the one fiscal policy question that is used by elected officials and politicians to place constraints on our ability to address the issues that we care about. And so I'm delighted to talk to you today to share why I am an unapologetic supporter of the Green New Deal and a range of other robust spending proposals that I just mentioned. One of the things that I think it's really important for citizens to understand is modern monetary theory, and to understand how MMT, for short, relates to issues like the Green New Deal. And so our campaign is really about trying to mainstream modern monetary theory, which has been a school within the economics discipline for 30 plus years. And I really want to help to mainstream MMT for average, ordinary people, because whatever your issue of concern is, whatever you're passionate about, whether it's addressing concerns as it relates to the environment, public education, mass incarceration, affordable housing, healthcare, addressing joblessness and unemployment in our society today, it's really critically important that you understand some of the core framing and concepts of MMT. And so I think I want to start by really just sort of raising who is this for? who is MMT for? Do you have to have a master's or a PhD in economics in order to really understand MMT, in order to understand monetary and fiscal policy for that matter? Do you have to be a subject matter expert? And to that question, I would say no. Modern monetary theory may have started as a school within the economics discipline, but it's for average, ordinary people. It's for activists and organizers, for anyone who's really concerned about how we're going to make our world a better place and how we're going to make our economy work for us rather than against us. And so this talk today, and I'm sure the other speakers that will come together later in the morning and afternoon are really all designed to help you to understand how we're going to pay for robust spending proposals such as a Green New Deal or Medicare for All, free public college. And for me, this is really critically important. I came to this journey as a local pastor wrestling with our foreclosure crisis here in the state of Maryland. Maryland ranked number 2 and 3 in the country in foreclosures in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. The county in which I pastor, Prince George's County, led the state in foreclosures. And so one of the things that I really wrestled with over the last 10 years that really started me on this journey was really, I saw the injustice of banks being bailed out and average ordinary people being put out of their homes. This really seemed to me to be a moral stain on our economy, and to really think about the just foundational questions about our economic system, questions about monetary and fiscal policy, I just had no knowledge of. And I'm so thankful today for my exposure to MMT, or modern monetary theory, because it's really helped me to understand that if we change the way we think about money, we can really change the world. And that's so important because conventional economics is really predicated on the assumption that money is scarce. This is sort of a carryover from the time in which our money system in America was based on the gold standard. Well, of course, many of you may know that we went off the gold standard in 1971. So what that means then is the ability of the federal government to print what we think of and use as dollars is no longer constrained by this scarce commodity called gold. And so MMT has really, and I really am so thankful to all of the academics and economists who have really done an incredible job over the past 3 decades of laying the sort of intellectual foundation for MMT. But I think some of the basic foundational concepts of MMT are that the federal government is not a household. Like, say this with me. Say the government. I say this with me. The government is not a household. Now you may ask, well, Delman, why are you saying this? Well, that's important because what I have found is that in many public policy conversations, whether it's with average, ordinary citizens, politicians, and even some economists, they operate from the assumption that the federal government's budget is like a household budget. And many of you know that in your household, you need revenue first in order to spend, right? And it's regarded as fiscally irresponsible to spend more than you have coming in. Well, MMT helps us to understand that the federal government, now we're not talking about local and state governments, but the federal government does not need revenue first in the form of borrowing or taxation in order to spend. And that really opens up enormous potential fiscal policy space for thinking about what's possible when it comes to funding robust spending proposals such as the Green New Deal. Think about it. God forbid if we had to go to war tomorrow as a nation. We don't want war. We want to do everything possible to avoid it. But God forbid we had to go to war tomorrow. Think about it. The federal government would not have a debate or a conversation about where's the money going to come from for the war. Politicians would not say which multi-millionaires and billionaires and corporations are we going to tax first so that we can spend money for the war. And they don't do that because the government does not need revenue first in order to spend on public priorities. If our elected leaders determine that this is in the national interest, we can create all of the money we need to address our greatest social and economic crises and needs, right? So in like manner, we are at war when it comes to the environment. Look, you know, experts tell us that we have about 10 years, 10 or 11 years to really be serious about addressing carbon emissions and getting the CO2 out of our environment to address global warming. We have about 10 or 11 years, right? And so to do this, it is going to take really bold proposals, right? We need bold proposals. We need bold steps. We really can't afford a kind of gradualism or incrementalism when it comes to addressing climate change. And so when it comes to the question of, you know, well, how are we going to pay for proposals like the Green New Deal, we need to free ourselves from this question of who we're going to tax first. What private sources of investment do we have to tap into in order to pay for proposals like a Green New Deal? We pay for it by creating the money for it, right? And so I want to say to all of the activists and organizers, I want you to do something that I've started to do. When I hear politicians now talk about, oh, well, this proposal is going to cost $30 trillion over 10 years. It's unaffordable. I say to them, it's not going to cost us $30 trillion to pay for Medicare for all, for example. It's going to create $30 trillion. It's not going to cost us, it's going to create $30 trillion. And the way that the federal government creates money is that the federal government creates money through deficit spending. This is probably the second aspect of modern monetary theory that I want to share. Since the federal government is not a household, though it's important to then understand, well, how the federal government creates money or puts money in circulation. And the way that the federal government puts money in circulation is through deficit spending. Now, in your household, deficit spending is a negative. And the thing about MMT is that it can kind of be counterintuitive until you really process it and understand it. Well, in your household, deficits aren't bad. Deficits are negative. But because the federal government has the power of the purse, has the power to create money, you know, in the olden days to print the money, the way that it creates money is through deficit spending. What's a deficit? A deficit is when the amount you spend exceeds, you know, taxes and revenue in the form of taxes and other forms of revenue, right? So when the federal government deficit spends, that puts money in circulation. Deficit spending is net public money creation. That's the way we say it in the Our Money campaign, that deficit spending is net public money creation. That when the federal government deficit spends, it creates money, it leaves money in circulation for the private sector, individuals and businesses to spend and to provide for a sustainable economy. So in order to pay for the Green New Deal, we need the federal government to do more deficit spending. And that deficit spending is not a bad thing. There's this hysteria that you oftentimes hear in the financial media where politicians, liberal and conservatives, Republicans, independents, and Democrats will decry budget deficits at the federal level. They will decry, the rising federal debt. Well, when you understand modern monetary theory, then you understand that we really want the federal government to run deficits. Because when the public sector is in deficit, when the federal government is in deficit, then the private sector is in surplus. And that's what we want. I really don't have time to go into this with the amount of time that I've been allotted, but that's a very core, fundamental aspect of MMT that I think really helps us to think about the possibilities for funding the Green New Deal. Now, invariably, someone's going to say, well, this sounds hyperinflationary. You know, that's one of the common criticisms that people will raise when it comes to talking about deficit spending and public money creation. Some smart person who's had a year or two of college econ, or perhaps they're an astute economist, they will say, well, this sounds hyperinflationary, and they will invariably attempt to point to some examples in history where money creation in their mind, or they assume, led to hyperinflation. They'll talk about Zimbabwe, they'll talk about Weimar Germany, they'll talk about Venezuela in a more recent context. And they'll say, well, no, we can't create money because this will lead to inflation. It is a travesty that people would raise this, because what we know is that inflation is not just the cause of money creation. It's a very complex issue that many seasoned economists and MMT economists know a lot about inflation. But you cannot compare inflation in Zimbabwe, Weimar Germany, and Venezuela to the context in America. These are not sovereign governments with a sovereign money system, and the context as it relates to productivity and resources are totally not what we're relating to here, right? But someone's going to say, well, what about inflation? Well, I think that's a good question, because it really leads to the third sort of aspect of modern monetary theory that I think is really important for me, that when it comes to robust spending proposals, we're not constrained by revenue, right? We know now that we're not constrained by revenue. And we can responsibly create, and the key word there is responsibly, we can responsibly create all of the money we need to address our greatest social and economic challenges, as long as we don't exceed our inflationary target, right? There are smart people who study all of the metrics of our economy. They have an inflationary target. And as long as we don't exceed that inflationary target, we can create all the money we need to address our greatest social challenges. And so that means then that money is not scarce. Money is almost, abundant. And money creation is ubiquitous. It happens all the time. And the question is, would we rather have an economy that relies on money created through public spending, or would we rather have an economy that relies on money created through private lending? Because money is going to be created in one of two ways. It is either going to be created by the government when it spends, or it will be created by private banks when it lends. And when the federal government underutilizes the power of money creation to address priorities in the public interest, when it underutilizes the power of the public purse, it forces the public, it forces individuals and businesses and local and state governments to then turn to private borrowing and lending in the form of floating bonds, taking out credit cards, and other kinds of debt, private debt, in order to address that need. We're saying that now the residual consequences of having an economy that relies on private lending. And I want to suggest that if we educate the public about the power of the public purse, we can address our greatest social and economic challenges, including our climate challenge through the Green New Deal. Say this with me: change money, change the world. Say it with me one more time. Change money, change the world. If we change the way we think about money, we can literally change the world. Dr. King said this: if a soul lives in crisis, sins will be committed. But the guilty one is not the one who commits the sins, but the one who causes the darkness. The challenges we see today, the cause of the darkness that we see today, socially and economically, is a function, I would suggest, of us underutilizing the power of the public purse to address our greatest social challenges. Look, thank you for inviting me to come to share with you today. I'm sorry if I went over my time, but I'm deeply passionate about how we develop a sustainable economy, an economy that works for us and not against us, an economy in which money is created to address issues in the public interest rather than credit being created to merely meet the interests of the private sector. Thank you so much. My name is Delman Coates with the Our Money Campaign. If you're interested in following us, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our web address is ourmoneyus.org. Thank you. Our web address is ourmoneyus.org. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for that. Delman, if you're listening, we want to thank you for making that great video. George, what's next on the agenda?
Can we get a copy of that video?
It'll be absolutely available.
Great, thank you.
You got it.
So next we're going to have three PA environmentalists come up and tell their story, share why this movement is important to them. So first we're going to have Craig Stevens. He is originally from California. He now owns his father's sixth generation family farm. And Craig first learned firsthand, I'm sorry, I can't read my writing. He learned firsthand the harms civil and human rights violations that extreme extracts cause. So in any case, sorry about that, my writing's horrible. But yes, Craig, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing out there? So as you heard, I'm a native Californian. I moved here to the East Coast when my dad got diagnosed with esophageal cancer, terminal. He lived a year. I spent the last year of his life with him in our ancestral home. And so I lost my mom to cancer and 10 other immediate family members to cancer. So when I hear the word cancer, I put my family's face on it. And hopefully not my kids, but I always think about them. So kind of interesting, I'm an accidental activist, but I'm not really an activist, I'm a realist. What that means is I was raised and brought up as a constitutional conservative, almost very hard right, Tea Party style. And what changed my mind was my firsthand experiences in Pennsylvania. In 2010, January, I moved to my ancestral property, and then I went to visit my neighbors in Demick, Pennsylvania, and that's what their well water looked like, and it is still looking like that. If you can see that stuff swirling around in there is diesel and antifreeze. So when this bottle has been left many times out in my car when it's 20 degrees outside, and it will not freeze. So I get challenged all the time by the oil and gas industry. Are you a water quality expert? And I said, no, but if I can take my tap water, put it in my freezer for 3 or 4 days, and it still does that, I don't have to be Bill Nye the Science Guy to figure out that Houston, we have a problem. So, believe it or not, that's not the only place, Demick, Pennsylvania. You can go to hundreds of communities in Pennsylvania and find the same problem. Their water changed color, mine did not. After living at my house for 3 years, in 2013, I ended up with a metal taste in my water. I called the DEP and the Department of Health immediately, and they said, well, if you get any health impacts, let us know. 2 weeks after the metal taste started, I was standing at my sink at my ancestral house, and my nose sinuses opened up like a faucet of blood. And I had 8 spontaneous nosebleeds over the next 2 weeks that were so severe, and it made me dizzy. That much blood came out of me. Had no idea what, but I'll tell you, it started with the metal taste, and it went right on for 2 more weeks. I stopped drinking and cooking with the water, and they went away just like a light switch was turned off. So don't let anybody tell you you can't figure out what might be causing something. Just stop doing something you think might be causing it. I'm going to riff through this pretty rapidly. Demick, Pennsylvania, there's a picture of candidate Wolf, that's Governor Wolf now, on August 8th of 2014 when he was candidate. He went to my neighbors in Demick, saw this problem, and then got elected, and has never been back nor interested in talking to anybody about the problem. Therein lies our issues. There's Ray Kimball's water tanks that they were installed in 2009. He's been living out of water tanks just like about 100 of my neighbors in Susquehanna County have for the last 10 or 11 years. They have to haul water and put bleach in it to shower, bathe longer. Those tanks that were put in by the industry that originally provided water are actually cattle tanks. They're non-potable. They're not for human consumption or use. It says right on it. That's the picture from Ray's tank. This is out front of Ray's house. Just 6-8 months ago, he had a 2.5 foot wide by 12 inch deep, 2 foot diameter hole that was in his road from the heavy traffic from these heavy trucks. And nobody fixed it. It took 4 months to get somebody to come out and fix it. Ray would hear cars hit it at night, and they would literally get the whole front end of the car torn off. That's what our road condition is. When I do tours, and I encourage anybody that's in the vicinity of Pennsylvania, anywhere nearby, we do tours in northeastern Pennsylvania and southwestern. Why southwestern? This is where drilling started. We became aware of a story in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette back in June that said 67 kids were found to have had rare cancers in the last 12 years. 13 passed away from the rare cancers. We're talking Ewing sarcoma and glioblastoma, the rare brain tumors. And I got interested because of the cancer issue. So now we're doing tours. We've actually, for the first time in the history of the Commonwealth, had 15 elected officials go down and tour that area, senators and House members. Before that, nobody would leave their district to go see anything because they thought, oh, I don't want to go to somebody else's district. But I said, why don't you go to see what's happening in theirs before it comes to yours? So our issue now is education. This is a picture of a 9 square mile spot in Demick, Pennsylvania. If you don't know this, for 10 years now, they've not been allowed to put Cabot Oil and Gas, which is the driller there, has not been allowed by the state to put a drill bit in the ground. But they'll still tell you there's nothing wrong with the water. So what's funny is with that, is we asked Scott Perry, the head of Oil and Gas. By the way, anybody knows Scott Perry has been in the same position for 12 years. We know where the problem is. They're called the DEP. They issued the permits to do this stuff. So we asked Scott, this is back in 2018, we said, Scott, why can't Cabot drill there? And he wrote back in an email on the letterhead for DEP, because Cabot has not yet demonstrated that the water supply has returned to background conditions. Today, I mean, it's still, they can't drill there. So when I educate, I just try to tell the truth. There's when the EPA came into Demick and said that there was a problem. There's the Auditor General of Pennsylvania. Auditor General De Pasquale says rapid shale gas development outpaced DEP's ability to oversee the industry or protect water quality. Nothing new. There's a flow chart showing Scott Perry's the only one still in that position after 3 governors, 7 DEP secretaries. Almost all of them go to work for the oil and gas industry after they're out. So if we wonder where the problem is, just look at the people we put in there. Penvest, who gives money for public projects, gave us a $12 million forgivable loan to run a water line to Demick. As soon as they voted to do that, they were sued. The state was sued and the DEP by some of our neighbors in the oil and gas industry not to build a water line to bring people safe water. So these people are living out of tanks and they have to haul the water. When it was being delivered, everybody out there, it was costing the industry, Cabot, $100 a day per delivery at homes. That's $3,000 a month for what used to come out of the ground for nothing, for the simple electric pump to bring it up to the surface. This is not something they're unaware of. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 consent orders signed by the CEO of Cabot that says, we don't agree with the findings, but we will not argue it in a court of law. Ray Kimball, who lives next door to this gentleman, Scott Iddy's water. Ray has been dragged into court, and they said they were lying about him. He's been brought in for a $5 million lawsuit against him because all the neighbors were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. That means they give them a little bit of money because they can't get it through the normal process, and they end up not being able to speak. Here's the Insurance Journal. That's a national journal. Here's their headline: fracking companies silence water complaints with sealed settlements. You can't. My dad was a first responder for 63 years in the Civil Air Patrol, longest serving in the history of Civil Air Patrol. He died an active lieutenant colonel. He said, when you mix health and safety with politics, everyone dies. Doesn't matter whether you're talking bubonic plague or AIDS or anything else. You cannot stop something that you refuse to acknowledge as existing. Believe it or not, there's only 89 unconventional drilling companies in the Commonwealth. You heard earlier, just Google, anybody out there, Google Wall Street Journal, oil and gas industry debt to the banks. Last year was $883 billion. I did not say million, I said billion. Now that we've passed into 19, almost to 20, it's over $1 trillion that the oil and gas industry owes the banks. We're betting the future on companies that in the last 10 years have incurred $1 trillion in debt that they can't pay back. I'm sorry, there is no future when you owe that. Here is the health consultation document by the ATSDR, that's CDC, saying that it's a health consultation for demic. I'm going to riff through this next one. So we put a water hydrant in to get my neighbor. I had a water hydrant installed by Pennsylvania American Water Company to get these people water because the governor, Corbett at the time, let him shut off the water deliveries. As soon as we put it in, we were attacked. The borough of Montrose, which is the county seat, filed against the property owner we put it on. Pennsylvania American Water installed it for free for us. And they filed a $500 a day zoning violation against them to stop. They said they didn't want the Demick people, the water pirates from Demick, getting the water from Montrose. Guys, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Here's a couple who are surrounded by a pooling unit, Cabot Oil and Gas again. They're the spot right in the middle that's still white, whereas everything else is cross-hatched. They surrounded them with a pooling unit. They would never sign, and to this day have not. They've extracted gas underneath their property, stolen it, and not paid them a dime. These people are very right-wing conservative people, but after touring with us, they realize that it's a losing game to sign up for this. Then the insults come, like PK's going to come up next, and Mariners 2 people. This is Virginia, and this is a federal. This is a threat assessment to people who protest against pipelines. I don't know about you, but if I live on the property, they're stealing it by eminent domain, whether it's the state or the federal government, I file a lawsuit. I'm not an activist. I'm not a terrorist. I'm the property owner that pays taxes. They've perverted the whole system where we, fighting for our rights, become the terrorists, and the ones that come in and destroy our property, cut our trees down, don't pay us at all. The Constitution Pipeline is an example. 25 miles in Pennsylvania, 100 miles to Albany in New York. When we heard about it in 2012, Vera Scroggins, my neighbor that does the tours, we went all along the route, what we thought was the route, and we educated people. We met Sean Lennon, who was going near the Sean Lennon Yoko Ono, John Lennon's family farm. And we got everybody riled up before they even did it. Why am I bringing it up? Because what they did was they got Pennsylvania, who says yes to everything, to say yes. So that they let the company come in and they cleared the trees for 25 miles all the way up to the border. But they had yet to get approval on the 100 mile. What company anywhere takes a project where 80% of it has not been approved, but they cut it down? And then they have the audacity to go, first they showed up at my neighbor's house, the Hollerins, with M16s and 30-round magazines and zip ties for 100. They never got in their way. But the show of force is to make sure that we, the citizens, stand down, that we don't give them any trouble. Well, I wonder what would have happened if they went to George Washington or Thomas Jefferson's property and tried the same thing. You know what would have happened. Hey, we're here, George, to cut down the trees and put in a 40-inch gas line, and we're going to transport this overseas, and you can't do anything about it. George Washington or Thomas Jefferson would have said, hey, hang on, I'm going to go get my attitude adjustment tool hanging above my fireplace. Load it up, and if you're in range when I get out, we'll see who's gonna put anything anywhere without my permission as the property owner. Now, we just accept this. We have to stop accepting it, folks. As you heard earlier, we the people own this country. These people are seat warmers. They represent us because we allow them to, but when they don't do our bidding, we need to toss them and get people in there. My own property, they tried to force a pipeline across my property by eminent domain. We fought it and won. They can't do that. But when they're installing it behind my neighbor's house, 16-inch pipeline, they blew the bottom of my 25-foot wide trout stream out 8 times over 2.5 months. My entire creek and a tributary of Susquehanna River were filled with drilling mud for months. They couldn't put a 16-inch line. You think they're going to put a 42-inch line underneath the Potomac or the James River? No, they're not. Or what they're happening, and you'll hear about Mariner East. The day they blew it out, they brought the mud-sucking trucks. One of them ran a stop sign and flipped over and crushed my neighbor John Jones to death in his car. You'll notice that the passenger door is open. That was his 17-year-old daughter, Allison, that got to watch her dad die 5 minutes after he was crushed into the car. So don't let anybody tell you that putting a pipeline in is not harmful. There's a pipeline in Westmoreland County that all of a sudden had a bad day and blew up. The house that was 200 feet away burned to the ground. The house that was 800 feet away melted all the plastic siding off the side of the vinyl siding off the side of the house, 800 feet away. It left a crater the size of a football field in there. So what do we do about it? Well, people are out there asking, well, it's the oil and gas industry, what can you do? Well, we do stuff about it. Like when nobody would listen in Pennsylvania, I started going with my team to other states. There's Florida. It took us about 3 years. Everything that's in yellow, representing 80% of the population of Florida, we just had the counties pass bans because at that time the legislature wouldn't pass one. Our focus is education. When you educate yourself, don't get afraid. They want you afraid. They want us all to run scared. Stand up against it. The only time you're going to regret it if you don't. We got so good at killing pipelines, like the Constitution pipeline was never revived. The state of New York said no. So now they started virtual pipelines. These are trucks. They look like Walmart trucks. They put methane, compressed natural gas in up to 5,000 psi. That's 3 or 4 times the pressure in a high pressure gas line. And as soon as they set them up, the second day they were in operation, they flipped one of them over in the ditch. That's a hazardous material vehicle that crashed. So far, they've had 6 crashes where injuries happened. The last 2 crashes in the last 3 weeks killed the 2 drivers. The one in Albany, a mile from the governor's mansion that flipped over, Albany. The first responders didn't know what it is, so they lit road flares. If that goes off, you want to know what the explosive potential of one of these trailers is? Anybody know what a mother of all bomb is? It's the largest in the inventory of the United States non-nuclear weapon. Largest bomb ever made that's non-nuclear. These are equivalent of 11 Moabs in one trailer, and they're driving on the roads right now, right down the road here. They're driving up and down the state. A pipeline costs $3 to $5 billion in up to about 4 or 5 years to get it installed if everything goes through. They can set up a filling station in our community like they did in 3 to 6 months with $80 to $100 million. They're running 100 of these a day from our area to near Albany, New York, and back and forth and back and forth. It's ridiculous. No oversight. Even after these crashes, the only time they came was when the drivers got killed. When the 6 got injured before that? No, they didn't. Don't just talk to people that you agree with. There's a picture of me with this water with Lindsey Graham, not exactly a left-winger. There's where Scott Pelley put it on CBS News that night. He wanted to know what was in the bottle. I said, contaminated water from fracking. He goes, you got a picture with Lindsey Graham with that? Yeah, I did. There's where I stood behind Governor Hogan when he signed the ban bill, a Republican in Maryland. Our education was key. There's Rick Scott. I'm standing with Rick Scott in Florida, educating him. There's Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida. We gave her information, pictures. There's the only governor I haven't met of the 13 places they tell him on. The governor that represents my family's property for 187 years, Governor Wolf. He runs from us every time we do it. And he's got a there's Governor Northam. Of course, he doesn't have his blackface on, so he might not be in trouble, but I'm just telling you right now, this is ridiculous. I go to the Democrat-controlled states, and I figure they'll listen. They run from you faster than the Republicans do. So here's my thing. Do not count anybody out, but don't think just because we put somebody in that we agree with 90% doesn't mean they're going to do things like poison us and put us in positions where our kids get cancer. What am I doing about it myself to help my children's future? I'll tell you what I'm doing. My 13th brand new vehicle, I have a business, every 3 years I buy a new vehicle, is a Chevy Bolt all electric. I gave up SUVs, that's what I drove because they carry stuff around for me. Why did I do that? Everyone said get a hybrid, you can't go anywhere in an all electric vehicle. 2 weeks after I bought it, I drove to Orlando, Florida to visit friends and back. Yes, you can go anywhere. What do I like about it? They're quiet, there's zero emissions, it's amazing. So there's the place I found in San Diego that actually has charging stations that are mobile for charging your battery electric vehicle without hooking up to power. It's standalone. That's what happens when innovation happens. Yes, we can do a Green Deal. Yes, we can save the planet. If we all go out and buy one of these things, by the way, they're reasonably priced. You get big rebates and you don't buy. I was $500 a month in gasoline because I traveled so much. Now I haven't been to a gas station in 15 months. My son asked me how much, he's in California, how much is gas out in Pennsylvania? I don't know, on the East Coast. I don't know, I haven't been to a gas station in 15 months. So when we do these things, when we put solar panels up, guess what? California is shutting off people's power because they're afraid of fires getting started. They can't shut your power off if you're making it yourself from your roof or from wind turbine or geothermal. They can't shut it off your power. And the only way to turn it off is to burn your house down, but not worrying about fires happening. So stand up, listen to what's being said today. I'm going to do a couple quotes and I'll hand it over to the ladies because they have really amazing things to say about what they've been going through. Gandhi said, "Earth provides enough for every man's need, but not every man's greed." That's exactly what we're talking about here. Nobody needs a giant pile of money while everybody else are suffering and trying to figure out how to stay alive. It is health, it is real wealth, not pieces of gold and silver, also Gandhi. MLK had some killer quotes. Matter of fact, go to DC and they got them all lit up on the wall. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. That's one of my favorites. But one of my also favorites is when we stood up against these guys in our neighborhood, we got no help. Matter of fact, our neighbors would run you over if you were out on the road. And so Martin Luther King says, "We will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And that silence is deafening. We can evade reality, but we cannot evade the consequences of evading reality. Ayn Rand. The question isn't who is going to let me, it's who's going to stop me. Also Ayn Rand. So when you're told that something's impossible, they said it'd be impossible to go to Florida and convince the Republicans to ban it. This is the 5th year in a row. This year, the last 3 years, the ban bills are being written by Republicans, co-sponsored by majority Republicans, and they will pass a ban bill there, and that's a Republican in charge. I don't care who's in charge. I don't care what color, red or blue. I don't care what letter they have next to their name. You have to make everybody do our bidding. We are the bosses. This country is owned by us. They do our bidding or they get out. They are seat warmers, and remember that. You can be respectful to politicians for their public service. But when they're doing public disservice, like our current government here, it's time to give them the boot. That's what we need to do. And I don't care whether we like them or not personally. Do you want me to announce who's coming up now, or is somebody else going to do it? Because PK's coming up. What's that? Yep. So what I'd like to do now, one thing I will tell you that's been phenomenal the last 10 years of me doing this is, I've met people that I didn't know from Adam 10 years ago that now I have their back and they have mine in this fight and struggle for our lives to do this. Amazing people I've met all over the country, especially in Pennsylvania, where I consider us one of the most oppressed for trying to just do the right thing here. PK and her neighbors have stood up against Mariner East 2. They switched the pipeline on them from a pipeline that was going to Ohio, which was the land was taken 80 years ago. All of a sudden, without notice, they flipped the direction of it, which is totally illegal. And then they decided instead of one pipeline that's got gasoline or jet fuel, that they would put 3 in with very dangerous natural gas liquids, which have a blast radius. You got 3 pipes in a row with blast radius 1.5 times what a gas pipeline is.
in people's backyards so close that their backyards collapsed and their patios started to fall in. The story they have to tell you about and the oppressive nature of our government is amazing, and that's why when you go in the trenches with people and you fight alongside of them, then these are friends for life. These are people I will know forever. So I want to thank you for the time. Like I said, just keep fighting. They can't win. We just have to, we are all addicts. This was like a 12-step program. Hi, I'm Craig. I'm a fossil fuel addict. That's what we are. We just say a week, we just stop buying gasoline in the whole country. The whole industry collapses. They can't have us stop buying. They're the pushers. If we stop taking their product and start making our own energy the way that you're learning about, we win. And we don't have to fight. There's no bloodshed. You just stop buying their product. Thank you again, and I'll invite ladies up here to explain what's happening, unless you'd like to introduce.
Does anybody have any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the next two speakers are going to come up together. The first one is PK Diddy, who I have no idea what her real name is, but I've known her for quite some time, and she is one of the best, most active environmentalists I've ever met in PA. She is a water protector for life. She is also connected with people who fight to on Native American lands to have their lands untouched. She is a analytical research chemist by training and environmental activist who is working to help educate communities being taken over by fracking pipeline industry and documenting it, sometimes by drone. And then we had a cancellation of a speaker, so we had a lovely woman take up the last minute spot, which was so awesome, so thank you. It's Carrie Gross, and she is from Chester County. She's been impacted by Mariner East Pipeline Project and has become active in the fight against fossil fuel industry and climate change. So, ladies.
Yeah, we always bring water.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna let Carrie go first.
Thank you, everybody.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us today. I'm just going to share a little bit about myself, my story. 3 years ago, I would have never thought that I would be standing up here. I was a working mom. I had 6-month-old twins and a 2-year-old, and I was a registered Republican, and I only voted in presidential elections. I naively thought that our government was working on our behalf and in our best interest. I did not think that I would ever become involved in anything like this. I didn't think that my voice would ever have any sort of power. And I didn't really think I even needed to, because again, I thought that our government was on our side. 6 months later, in May of 2017, Mariner East came to my neighborhood in Exton, Pennsylvania. And I had already known it was coming, but didn't really know all the details. And then as soon as the construction started, learned more and more about it. As Craig kind of gave a brief introduction to it, Mariner East is a series of pipelines. It's natural gas liquids, highly volatile, and they're coming straight through our communities to all the way across the state, but to Delaware County, Marcus Hook, to be shipped overseas to be made into plastics. And as our community learned more and more about it, we learned that this is way more dangerous than your average pipeline. Many of us started out, myself sadly, but admittedly, thinking, let's reroute this. This isn't safe right here, let's go put it, in the farmer's property or, somewhere else because it's less dangerous. But that quickly